السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعين به ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا. من يهده الله فهو المهتد ومن يضلل فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. أما بعد, جزاكم الله خير, my dear respected brothers and sisters. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless everyone who's trying to listen to this lesson, and may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala surround us with his angels, and we ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to give us the sincerity for us to do this. So, brothers and sisters, we've been talking about this for quite some time, as far as in how do we, as Muslims, develop our doctrine, our aqidah. And one of the most common misconception that we see all the time is that many people think that it's based on blind faith or based on something that is non-rational. But alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, that one of the things that we as Muslims, we always should be proud of, and I keep repeating this, is the fact that we are the basis of our religion is based on solid background. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. So brothers and sisters, today we're going to be talking about it and discussing the methods. How do we deduct? How do we deduce? How do we infer the basis of our religion? The method that we utilize. So one question that some people might ask is, how is this related to me? How is it going? How I'm gonna, what I'm gonna take from this lesson for me forward? So, brothers and sisters, we live in a world nowadays that many of us are. We see many types of doubts, many types of uncommon questions. So the question here is that we could use the same method that we're going to be learning today of how can we arrive at answers to all these doubts, answers to all these misconceptions, because today we're going to be what we're going to be doing today is how we're going to deduce the doctrine of Islam. But also the same thing can be implemented. The same thing can be replicated when we're trying to answer any other question in life. When someone comes to you with a doubtful matter, when someone comes to you with a misconception, how are you going to answer it? Are you going to say, well, you're right, and then you turn your face? No. You're going to do some sort of research. How is the research going to be? What sources you're going to be utilizing? Based on what sources and what are the priority of sources, and etc. So that's what we're going to be doing today, Bismillah ta'ala. So I'm going to share the presentation with you, Bismillah ta'ala, so everybody will be able to gonna see it. Okay. So this is the presentation, Bismillah ta'ala. Okay. So today, what we're going to be doing is we're trying to, what is the doctrine, inference, and the structure and method, bi'idhnillah ta'ala. Okay. So again, I'm gonna be starting out with a very basic stuff. What is inference? People tend to ask the same question all the time. What is inference? What does that mean? Here we're talking about what is the steps that it takes to prove something. What is the steps that it takes to prove something? And that's what we're going to be doing today. Is what is the method that we take to prove a doctrine, to prove our aqidah, the basis of our aqidah. So we're going to be going through, bi'idhnillah ta'ala, a few different steps. Bi'idhnillah ta'ala. The very first thing that we need to keep in mind, brothers and sisters, is when we are trying to prove a conception, the very first question that we need to ask ourselves is the following. Okay. The first steps that we do in this investigation, in this researching, we must have a full conception of the question in order for us to arrive at the right answer. Some people like to do shortcuts. Some people try to cut corners. Some people try to look at certain evidences and leave others. No. When you are trying to arrive at any question or researching any subject, you have to make sure that you collect everything that you have, so you could surround yourself with so you could surround yourself with 360 degrees of everything that is surrounding that issue. So that's number one, and that's very important. Because why is that? Because we see this all the time. We see this in which that people wanted to, they want to prove something based on their ego, based on their hawa, like we talked about this last time, based on what they like, and they bring the evidence that they want you to see, and they completely disregard a whole lot of evidences that they intentionally or unintentionally try to hide from you. And this is not correct. So the very first thing that we have to do is that you have to make sure you have proper conception of the issue. Surround yourself with this issue from all aspects. Number two, brothers and sisters, the very first thing that we need to do is that we have to make sure that we are sorting out the sources. Okay, and here we're going to be talking about a few things that we must understand as Muslims. When we can't, when we want to sort out the types of um, sources that we have that enable us to arrive at the answer of that question. Like for instance, we have the Quran and we have the Sunnah. So first of all, the Quran of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then the saying of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Okay, then where we have something called an ijma', the consensus of all the Muslims, like the majority of the big scholars, what they say. Okay, and then we have something called yani al-aql, what our rationale say, al-fitra, what our instincts say. So there's a lot of things that we have to take in perspective, in order for us to arrive at a proper answer. Okay, so the very first thing is that we have to see, brothers and sisters, is what we call الاعتبار وعدم الاعتبار. What is something that we call in English we call it, what is something that we regard or something that we disregard? What does that mean? Meaning, subhanallah, every science, every field of knowledge have its own sources. Like for instance, in the field of geography, they have a certain sources that they go by. If in the field of medicine, they have a certain sources that they go by. We have to make sure the very first thing is that we do is that when we are talking about a subject, we have to go to its sources. There's something. What is something that is gonna, what do we consider regard or disregard? So that means that, for instance, if someone is talking about, for instance, math or physics, then we have to look at the sources of math and the sources of physics. We look at publications, we look at research that is into this mathematical question. We don't go into geography, just simple stuff. So every field of knowledge have its own inferred sources. Natural science has its own sources, history has its own sources, humanities have its sources, and etc. So we in order for us to use, we have the right source. We have to use what is appropriate and what is suitable for this research. That's number one. Okay. Again, why is that? Because a lot of times they say, like for instance, when the people wanted to disprove a question in Islam, okay, they go into, like for instance, something beyond the Quran and the Sunnah. That doesn't make any sense. If you want to prove something within Islam, you have to go by what the hierarchy of things. Okay. Second thing is, a lot of times is what people now common mistake that people fall into is what we call um, is what we call, for instance, uh, الصحة والضعف. Not all sources or not all evidences are in the same level of authenticity. For instance, we have something that is correct. When it comes to the Quran, for instance, but when it comes to the Hadith, we have a Hadith that is correct. We have something that is okay, Hasan. We have something called Da'if, weak. We have something called Mawdu', something that is fabricated. We have something called Kadhib, purely lie. So not every single evidence it's the same thing. No, all of it have different hierarchies, and although all of it have different levels. And again, I wanted to kind of shed one uh, type of one idea that I want many Muslims to understand. When we say that things that are mentioned in the Quran and the Sunnah, when we mention and we say something is mentioned in the Quran and Sunnah, we don't say khalas, but close your mind and surrender yourself to it. No. ابن تيمية الله سبحانه وتعالى, what he said, دلالة الكتاب والسنة على أصول الدين ليس بمجرد الخبر. The evidence of the fact that the Quran and the Sunnah is true is not based on the fact that we were just told so. No, he said many people who are misguided, they say this, whether it was from people who of all sort of misguided groups, but in reality, a lot of times we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is talking to us in the Quran in which that He wants to, um, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to think. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to use our brain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala talks to us in a way and He proved to us utilizing our rationale. For instance, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, "Am khuluqu min ghayri shay'in am humul khaliqun." Were they created by themselves, or were they created by somebody else, or they created themselves? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here is telling us, think, use your mind, use your brain. So that's very important, that and Islam doesn't encourage blind following. No, Islam is all about thinking and pondering and using your rationale. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala many times in the Quran says, أَفَلَا يَتَفَكَّرُونَ? Don't they think? أَفَلَا يَعْقِلُونَ? Don't they use their rationale? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, أَفَلَا يَعْلَمُونَ? Don't they know? أَفَلَا يَتَدَبَّرُونَ? Don't they ponder on this? So there's a lot of times in the Quran He tells us, don't you think? Don't you ponder? Don't you rationalize this, and etc. So this is very important. Okay. So again, when it comes to sorting out the going back to our point, when it comes to sorting out the evidence, is not all evidence are the same. Evidence come in different levels. Okay. Third thing. Okay. The third type of evidence that we need to evaluate is what we call, something in Islam called something qat'i and dhanni. Okay. Some evidence in the Quran, brothers and sisters, is what we call evidence that is qat'i. What does it mean? Meaning is definitive. What is an evidence in Islam that is definitive? Meaning that it only have one interpretation. Okay. In many, like when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says something, it only has one interpretation. So there's only one meaning that you could get out of it. This is what we call qat'i dalala. Something that is, you only could be able to have one and only interpretation. Another type is what we call dhanni dalala, something that is presumptive, meaning that you're able to get two or more interpretation out of it. Like for instance, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, وَالْمُطَلَّقَاتُ يُتَرَبَّصْنَ بِأَنفُسِهِنَّ ثَلَاثَةَ قُرُوءٍ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for instance, He talks about the divorcees, or He talks about the pregnant women, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala used the word quru'. For instance, in Sharia, quru' have two different meanings. Sometimes it means when the stage of being clean, or the stage of period. Okay, so meaning the same word, but what the scholars have get out of it, two different meanings. So this is dhanniya dalala, meaning that it's not definitive. It's not only one interpretation. Okay, do this, khalas, it's over. Another example, like for instance, when Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam has sent a group of the Sahaba and told them, don't pray until you reach Bani Qurayda. Okay, so this is on dhanni also. Allah, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said when you reach. So some of the Sahaba prayed, have interpreted in such way that they said, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam meant this way, and some of them prayed early, and some of them prayed later. Okay, so again, that's the point here. The point here is that when the words or the command is not concrete, when it's not concrete, is what we call presumptive, meaning to have not only one interpretation, but rather than several. So this is the difference between قطعي الدلالة وظني الدلالة, something that is definitive and something that is presumptive. Again, we can't assume only one interpretation of the presumptive to be the correct one. Maybe there's others, you see. And that's sometimes what people tend to, the mistake that some people do, they only take one meaning or one interpretation and neglect the other ones. Okay, and this is wrong. Okay, so this is again one type of evidence that we need to sort out. Another type of evidence is what we call al-ihkam wa tashabuh. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, in English, we call precision and elusiveness. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said in the Quran, هو الذي أنزل على عبد هو الذي أنزل عليك الكتاب منه آيات محكمات هن أم الكتاب وأخرى متشابهات. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, brothers and sisters, and this is even important for the Muslims to understand, there are some verses in the Quran what we call muhkam, meaning that it's precise. or what we call things that we go back to, like the main branch that we go back to. Okay, and other ones that is what we call elusive, meaning that it could be more than one type. You could translate it in several ways. Let me give you an example so you could have a better understanding. It's different than definitive امري. Some يعني is different than what we call ظني وقطعي. Let me give you an example. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, for instance, when he says قل هو الله أحد, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? One. So this is muhkam, meaning that this is what we go back to. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is what? Is one. Okay? But when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, another ayah, he says, إِنَّا نَحْنُ نَزَّلْنَا الذِّكْرَ وَإِنَّا لَهُ لَحَافِظُونَ. We the one who revealed the Quran, and we the one who's going to protect it. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala here, he says we, does that mean more than one? No. Here means we, the of majesty, you know. So how are we gonna how are we gonna translate this? We go back to the muhkam, to the main source. Okay? In which that we say Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said muhkam is this, where we go back to, in which that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is one. Okay, and this means something else, means that this is the we of majesty. It doesn't contradict the first one, but this is the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tends to express this in himself sometimes. Another example, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for instance says, like when he talks about Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wassalam, okay, فَنَفَخْتُ فِيهِ مِنْ رُوحِي. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blowed into Sayyidina Isa, Jesus son of Mary, from his own spirit. So does that mean he's son of God? Does that mean he's God? No. This is mutashabih. This is something, elusive. It does not, this is what it not means. What is muhkam, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said, when Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, إِنِّي عَبْدُ اللَّهِ آتَانَا الْكِتَابَ وَجَعَلَ النَّبِيَّ. I am the servant of Allah. Here, yes, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blowed into him, but doesn't mean he's God. But Allah in the muhkam, what is precise, what we go back to is that Sayyidina Isa alayhi salatu wasalam, Jesus peace be upon him, is what? Is a son, is a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Is a servant of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So this is the way we and that's the problem that you see sometimes with other religions. There is no differentiation, any any evidence can be interpreted. But no, there are certain things that we have that we can think of as concrete, that we go back to. It's something that it's the basis that we go back to. And everything is that, it branches out of it. It does not, they don't contradict each other, but we translate it based on the muhkam. We translate what is elusive based on the muhkam. You see? So this is the way we go. And this is very important. That's many people tend to misunderstand. Okay? Three, and another important aspect is that, brothers and sisters, when we are trying to adjust or understand the relationship between the sources, we have to make sure we have to make sure of the following. Okay, is the fact that one of the origins of the deduction, is controlling the relationship between all these sources. We have to understand that not all the sources are the same. Like, for instance, just like we mentioned here, sometimes things are correct, sometimes it's not correct. Sometimes things are definitive, sometimes not definitive. Sometimes things are muhkam, sometimes it's not. So we have to understand, when we bring all the evidences together, we have to know the priority. Is it Quran? Is it Sunnah? Is it Ijma'? Is it sahih or is it not sahih? Is it muhkam or is it mutashabih? Is it qat'i or is it dhanni? You see? So this is the relationship between all of them. We have to prioritize, and that's what the scholar does. The scholar, he put all these evidence in front of him, and based on that, he would make a proper understanding of the situation. So this is the way we tend to evaluate things. Okay. Next thing is, inshallah, so how we go about that. The very first thing is that the different strength of the evidence is in terms of how, I just mentioned this, is based on how strong or how close or how the hierarchy of the evidence. Second thing is that we also we take in perspective if the revelation is the main proof of the piece of evidence, it doesn't mean that we neglect everything else. No. You know, just because something is revealed by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that does not mean we neglect the rationale and the aql and the fitra. No, 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 no. We take that part of our we arrive at the conclusion. Yes, the very first important thing is revelation from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Why? Because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we don't, and that's another thing, brothers and sisters, we have to understand that not everything that human beings, we are limited into our minds. We don't know everything. I don't know everything. You don't know everything. So who knows everything is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is instructing us to do certain things, it's what is good for us. You know, is what is good for us. And sometimes we know the wisdom for it, and sometimes we don't. Okay. But again, when we are trying to gather the evidence, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did not tell us to shut off our mind. He told us to utilize our brain and etc. And there are many aspects of that mentioned in the Quran, just like I said before. Okay. Third is that we have to. This is very very important, brothers and sisters. Is that when we Ibn Taymiyyah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with him, he said that the majority or the basis of our evidence, the basis of our deen, of our aqidah, you could almost all the time deduct it rationally, but not necessarily things beyond that. Okay, like for instance, when we talk about, and this is again, it makes complete sense, and this is the words of the scholar. He said الأصل في الدلالة العقلية والفطرية دلالتها على مسائل الاعتقاد بالطريقة الإجمال لا بالتفصيل. Like, so what does that mean? Meaning, like for instance, the main basis of our religion, or any religion, you should be able to arrive at rationally. But something beyond that, not necessarily. Like for instance, if I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is God and his revelation is correct, that does not mean I have to deduce and make sure if I understand each and everything afterward. Yeah, for instance, just like the example of the tree that I always give. The tree, in order for you have to have a solid tree that stands against the wind, you have to have solid roots, all right? That is in the ground. So this is the way. Everything have to be rational. Okay, the roots are like the rational, the way we deduce things rationally. Okay, when it comes to the branches, like for instance, someone we said, okay, I believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Do you believe in him? Yes. Does it make sense? Yes. Is it rational? Yes. Is there proofs? Yes. Then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told you to pray. Okay, I also could rationalize the reason why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to pray. Okay, why 5 times a day? I don't know. Why not 6, 7? I don't know. You see, some things we cannot deduce rationally. So when your bases are built on strong bases, you could build as many as you want, build as many floors as you want. Okay, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not going to sit during his revelation to Allah, to Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, sent and trying to rationalize to watch each and everything that we're doing. Then it's going to take the whole imagine if everything needs to be rationalized. Imagine if everything that we have to do as Muslims or any other religion, we have to rationalize. Then the Quran is going to be an encyclopedia, in which it's not going to be one book, it's going to have to be 50 books. No. So that's why it's important that part of our belief is that we believe in ghaib. Yes, sometimes we understand the wisdom of certain things. Yes, and that's great. But that doesn't mean that you have to understand the wisdom of each and everything. Okay? That's very important for us to understand. So again, the basis can be rationalized, but beyond that, no. The fourth thing, brothers and sisters, is that we have to make sure when we are dealing with the requirements of the Sharia that know that the Sharia itself, it is the one that dictate the reward and punishment. The Sharia, the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is the one that dictates the reward and punishment. Why? Because it's the word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's not based on what I think, or what you think, or what she thinks, or what he thinks, or our neighbor thinks. No. Again, this is part of, we could, sometimes we know the wisdom behind it, sometimes we don't. But if we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows what's best for us, then we trust and we believe and we submit to what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us. Number 4 here, adjusting the tools of understanding the resources of inference. What does that mean, brothers and sisters? It means here is that when we are trying to um, understand the message of the Sharia, we have to know that we have to know the relationship between all these sources. Like for instance, because when we and we kind of touched to this point before, okay, not everything is the same. Not we can when we are when we have to make sure we have the right tools and all the tools are available, meaning that we have the hadith. Like for instance, when we are trying to arrive at an answer that you are researching, you have to make sure that you are looking at what the scholars have said, what Allah have said, what Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam have said, what the hadith have said, you know, what the predecessors have said, and etc. Okay, you have to have all the tools in front of you. Okay. Now, when you are gathering the Sharia evidences, and that's the fifth point here, when we're gathering the Sharia evidence in research, we have to make sure that the following is that um, is what we call الدال والمدلول. Okay, it's very um, it's very. I mean, we kind of talked about this in the beginning of this lecture. What does it mean? Is that when we are trying to do something, arrive at the answer of something, we have to make sure that the evidences that we are utilizing proves that are in direct relationship with the question in mind. Let me give you an example. Let's say we try to say how the sun gives energy. Okay. And someone said, well, I have a light bulb in front of me and it gives lights. And I'm going to use that to say how the sun gives energy. And what is the relationship between a light bulb and the sun? You see, so whatever evidences that we are using, that يعني الدال والمدلول in Arabic we say it, that whatever evidences that we are using, it have to have a direct relationship with the question that we have in mind. We cannot bring like for instance, we cannot say, Wallahi, I'm going to bring evidences that is in medicine to prove geography, or so it have to be related. And I kind of talked about this this is what in philosophy they call it الدال والمدلول, evidence and its relationship with its connection. Okay. Sixth thing is that taking into account the significance of the context. That's very important. So many people fall into this problem so many times when they are researching things in Islam, or trying to find a doctrine in Islam, is that always look at the context. Don't take things out of context. Don't, again, this is very common, even sometimes with people who are weak in Islam. They take things out of context, or some people who misinterpret something, take things out of context. Make sure that when you are researching, is that you are taking things within their context. Okay. Seventh thing is make sure that you are paying attention to the requirement of the process. Again, make sure that you are following the process itself. And seventh and eighth, and not fun, and that you are making sure that while you are researching, that you are responding or answering all the attacks that is coming towards you. And that's the problem that we see with other religions. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guide them. Is when we are trying to research an issue. I'm going to explain this again. We're trying to arrive when you are trying to arrive researching an issue and trying to arrive at a conclusion. And let's say someone, while he's doing that, he had, let's say, 5 doubts that have made him think about how to answer that question. Okay. If while I'm doing my research, I was not able to answer these 5 doubts, that there is something wrong with my doctrine. Of course. But if I was able to answer all of those questions, then whatever conclusion I have arrived at is 100% correct, and whatever doctrine I have is solid. But that's the problem that we see with many doctrines, other doctrines that is beyond Islam, is that they don't have an actual explanation. They don't have a reason. I mean, it's either based on desire or ego, or based on they don't want to argue for the sake of argument. No, all of these things are, I mean, Allah Subhanahu wa Taala guide them, have no basis. But again, it's important when you are researching, as this eighth point that we are mentioning here, is the fact that you are answering all the objection that is coming against you. Otherwise, what's going to happen? You're going to have a weak argument. You have no basis. Your doctrine is weak, and etc. So, again, brothers and sisters, this is the method that we our religion is based on. First of all, we have, I mean, in summary, I'm going to summarize everything here now, is the fact that we have to make sure that you are researching the question from all sorts of aspects. Make sure that you are understanding the level of evidences. Sometimes things are, make sure that you are using the evidences for the right source. You have to make sure that things are not all the same, authenticity. You have to make sure not all evidence are the same level. Some things are definitive. Sometimes is presumptive. ظني and قطعي. Sometimes things are muhkam. Sometimes mutashabih, precise and elusive. And also, when we are doing this, is we have to make sure that we understand that not all the relationship among all of these evidences. We have to put a hierarchy to what is most important. Like, for instance, the revelation is the highest thing that we take. And then after that, the Prophet Muhammad, then ijma', then etc. And then while we are doing this, okay, we have to make sure that we have to make sure that we are open to other sort of evidences, things that are, for instance, rational or fitra. Okay. Also, we have to make sure that understand, give the Sharia its priority. We have to make sure that we utilize all the tools that are available. We have to make sure that that الدال والمدلول, meaning the evidence and what that is relating to the question in mind. And also, we have to make sure we know the context, and we have to make sure that we're able to answer all the objections. With that, alhamdulillah, this is the method for deducing our doctrine. I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to guide all of us, and I ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept for us. جزاكم الله خير. لحسن استماعكم سبحانك وبحمدك نستغفرك ونتوب إليك، وعصر إن الرسالة في خص الذين عملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خير.